The little girl would one day ask her mother how she got her name. And Taylor would smile through tears and say, "You were born on the coldest night of the year, when I thought hope was frozen solid. But someone opened a door when the whole world had locked theirs." But that story begins 6 months earlier, on Christmas Eve, when Taylor Reeves learned that love was a lie and survival was the only truth left. Welcome to Crimson Voices, where second chances aren't just for the innocent. They're for the broken, the dangerous, and the ones brave enough to change. If you believe even the coldest hearts can thaw for the right reasons, hit that subscribe button and smash the like to support stories that make you feel something real. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We read every single one. Now let's see how one freezing night changed 2 lives forever. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through Chicago's south side like a serrated blade, slicing through Taylor's thin coat, as if the fabric were tissue paper. December 24th, 8:40 p.m. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees, and the weather app on her dying phone, 3% battery, no data plan, predicted it would hit single digits by midnight. She pressed one hand against the brick wall of the closed pawn shop, the other cradling her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant. 37 weeks, to be exact. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, a tiny fist or foot protesting the cold that seeped through Taylor's jeans and into her bones. "Please," she whispered to no one. To God, maybe, though she'd stopped believing in anyone listening months ago. Just a little longer. Stay in there a little longer. 3 hours ago, Timothy had shoved her out of his car on the corner of 47th and Ashland. 3 hours ago, he'd thrown her duffel bag, containing everything she owned that mattered, which wasn't much, onto the slushy pavement and told her he was done playing house with someone else's mistake. Someone else's mistake. As if the baby pressing against Taylor's bladder, making her back scream, making her feet swell until her boots cut circulation. As if that baby wasn't half his DNA. But Timothy had a new girlfriend now. Someone from his accounting firm. Someone with a flat stomach and a 401k. Someone who didn't vomit every morning or cry during insurance commercials because she couldn't afford the coverage. Taylor had called her sister. Hillary had sent the call to voicemail. Texted back 20 minutes later, busy with Marcus's family. Merry Christmas. Be safe. Be safe. As if safety were a choice Taylor could simply make, like choosing regular or decaf. Another contraction rolled through her abdomen, the 4th in the past hour. Braxton Hicks, probably. False labor. Her OB had warned her about them during the one appointment Taylor had managed to afford before her Medicaid got tangled in paperwork hell. But this one felt different. This one started low in her back, wrapped around her middle like a vice, and squeezed until Taylor's breath came in short gasps that fogged the air in front of her face. She needed to move, needed to find somewhere warm. The shelter on Halstead was 14 blocks north, and Taylor had walked it before, but not 8 months pregnant. Not in weather that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground. She picked up her duffel bag with shaking hands, took 3 steps. Her water broke. It wasn't like the movies, no dramatic gush, no puddle spreading across pristine tile. It was a warm trickle down her inner thighs, soaking through her jeans in the kind of wet that turned freezing within seconds. Taylor looked down at the dark stain spreading across the denim and felt something inside her crack open wider than her cervix ever could. Terror. Pure, animal terror. "No," she said out loud. No, not here. Not now." Another contraction, stronger this time, doubling her over. The duffel bag hit the ground. Taylor braced both hands on her knees, felt the baby drop lower, impossibly lower, and a sound came out of her throat that she'd never made before. Guttural. Primal. A car turned onto the street. Black. Expensive. The kind of car that didn't belong in this neighborhood after dark. The kind that meant either someone was lost or someone was here on business that wasn't anybody's business. Taylor didn't care. She stumbled toward it as it slowed near the intersection, one hand raised, the other clutching her belly. "Please," she called out, her voice cracking. "Please, I need help." The car stopped. The back window rolled down 3 inches, just enough for Taylor to see a sliver of the interior. Leather seats, dark and pristine. Just enough for her to meet a pair of eyes that should have sent her running in the opposite direction. Gray. Cold. The kind of eyes that had seen things, done things, buried things in shallow graves, and slept fine afterward. But Taylor was past the point of self-preservation, past the point of caring whether the man in the back of that car was a savior or something worse. "My water broke," she said, and her voice sounded strange even to her own ears. Flat, factual, like she was reporting the weather. "The baby's coming. I don't have anyone. I don't have anywhere. Please." The eyes behind the window studied her. Taylor saw herself reflected in the dark glass, hollow-cheeked, hair stuck to her forehead with sweat despite the cold, coat hanging open. Because she couldn't zip it over her belly anymore. She looked like exactly what she was. Desperate. Disposable. The window rolled down completely. "Get in," a man's voice said. Low, controlled. The kind of voice that didn't make suggestions, only gave commands that people followed or regretted. Taylor should have asked questions. Should have at least looked at his face fully, tried to memorize features in case this ended badly, and someone needed to identify the last person who'd seen her alive. But another contraction seized her, and Taylor stopped thinking entirely. She yanked open the door and collapsed into the back seat, her wet jeans immediately soaking into the leather. The duffel bag landed at her feet. The door closed. The man beside her didn't recoil from the amniotic fluid spreading across his pristine interior. Didn't curse or demand she get out. He leaned forward and spoke to the driver in a language Taylor didn't recognize. Italian, maybe, or something close to it. The car moved. Fast. Taylor's vision swam. She realized she was crying only when she tasted salt on her lips. "Hospital," she managed. "Please, a hospital." "We're going to Northwestern," the man said, his voice closer now. When Taylor forced her eyes to focus, she saw him properly for the first time. Late 30s, dark hair, short and neat. A jaw that looked like it had been carved from marble and then broken once, badly, before healing at a sharper angle. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than Taylor had made in the past 6 months, a white shirt open at the collar, and a watch that caught the streetlights and threw gold across the car's interior. And those eyes. Gray. Unreadable. Fixed on her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. "How far apart?" he asked. "What?" "Contractions. How far apart?" Taylor's brain stuttered. 4 minutes? Maybe 5? I don't..." She pressed both hands against her stomach as another one built. "I don't know. I wasn't timing them. I was trying to find somewhere that wasn't a fucking alley to give birth in." Her voice broke. The contraction peaked. She heard herself make that sound again, and distantly registered the man's hand hovering near her shoulder, not quite touching, like he wanted to offer comfort, but had forgotten how. "Breathe," he said. "In through your nose. Count to 4. Out through your mouth. Count to 4. Taylor obeyed because she didn't have the capacity to do anything else. In. 2, 3, 4. Out. 2, 3, 4. The contraction ebbed. Taylor sagged against the seat, shaking. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Taylor." She swallowed. "Taylor Reeves." "How old are you, Taylor?" 26. "Anyone we should call? Family? The father?" Taylor laughed. It came out broken, jagged. The father put me out on the street 3 hours ago. My sister won't pick up, so no one to call." Something flickered across the man's face, too quick to name. His jaw tightened, and, for a moment, Taylor thought she saw rage, the controlled kind, the kind that didn't explode, but instead burned cold and calculated. "You're not alone now," he said. It was such an absurd thing to say. Taylor was alone. Had been alone since her parents died in a car accident when she was 19. Had been alone through every bad decision, every wrong turn, every night spent wondering how she'd ended up 26 and pregnant and abandoned on Christmas Eve. But the way he said it, flat, factual, like he was stating an immutable law of physics, made something in Taylor's chest unclench. "I don't even know your name," she whispered. "Victor," he said. And then, after a pause that felt weighted, "Victor Morandi." The name meant nothing to Taylor. Should it have? She searched his face for clues, found only that same controlled intensity. "Thank you," she said. "Victor, thank you." He nodded once, turned to look out the window. The city blurred past, lights and snow and people, hurrying home to warm houses and families that wanted them. "How much longer?" Taylor asked the driver, a man she could barely see beyond the headrest. He had silver hair, broad shoulders, and hands that gripped the wheel like he'd driven through worse than a Chicago winter. 8 minutes, the driver answered. His voice was gruff, accent thick. "We're taking side streets. Faster." Taylor closed her eyes, counted breaths. The baby kicked, frantic now, like she knew they were running out of time. "Hey." Victor's voice cut through the fog. Taylor opened her eyes. He was looking at her again, and this time his expression had shifted into something she couldn't quite read. "What are you naming her?" "Her?" "The baby. You keep saying she." Taylor blinked. She hadn't realized. "I don't know yet. I had a list, but I lost it. When Timothy—" She trailed off, shook her head. "How do you know it's a girl?" Victor's mouth almost curved. Almost. Call it intuition. Another contraction. Stronger. Taylor gripped the edge of the seat, white-knuckled, and Victor's hand finally landed on her shoulder, heavy, grounding, warm through the thin fabric of her coat. 4 minutes, the driver said. Taylor focused on breathing, on the pressure of Victor's hand, on the fact that she wasn't going to die alone in an alley, and her baby wasn't going to be born on frozen concrete. Small mercies. Christmas miracles, maybe, if she still believed in those. The car pulled up to Northwestern Memorial's emergency entrance. Victor was out before it fully stopped, yanking open Taylor's door, motioning to someone Taylor couldn't see. 2 nurses appeared with a wheelchair. Taylor barely registered the transition from car to chair, the automatic doors sliding open, the blast of warm air that made her skin prickle. "Name?" one of the nurses asked, her voice brisk and competent. "Taylor Reeves," Victor answered before Taylor could. 37 weeks. Water broke approximately 30 minutes ago. Contractions every 3 to 4 minutes. The nurse looked at Victor, then at Taylor. "Are you the father?" "No," Taylor said quickly. "Yes," Victor said at the same time. The nurse's eyebrows rose. Victor met her gaze steadily. "For the purposes of admission and authorization, yes. I'm covering all costs, whatever she needs." The nurse nodded slowly, made a note on her tablet, started wheeling Taylor toward the elevator. Taylor twisted in the chair, looking back at Victor. He stood in the middle of the ER lobby in his expensive suit, hands in his pockets, watching her disappear with an expression that looked almost like... what? Grief? Determination? Fear? "Wait," Taylor called out. "Victor." But the elevator doors closed, and he was gone. Taylor's daughter was born at 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, weighing 5 pounds and 3 ounces. Small, but healthy. Lungs that screamed loud enough to echo down the hallway. A cap of dark hair, impossibly soft. Eyes that hadn't decided their color yet, squinting against the fluorescent lights. The OB, Dr. Patel, kind-faced and efficient, placed the baby on Taylor's chest while the nurses cleaned them both up, and Taylor felt something fundamental shift in her universe. The world narrowed to this: the weight of her daughter against her sternum, the tiny starfish hands grasping at nothing, the snuffling breaths that sounded like the beginning of everything that mattered. "Hi," Taylor whispered. Her voice was wrecked, from screaming through contractions. "Hi, baby girl. I'm your mom." The baby's eyes opened a sliver, unfocused, searching. "You're safe now," Taylor promised. "I've got you. I'm never letting you go." It was a promise she meant with every fiber of her exhausted, aching body. They moved her to a recovery room 2 hours later. Private, spacious, with a window that overlooked the Chicago skyline glittering with Christmas lights. The kind of room Taylor knew her non-existent insurance wouldn't cover. "There's been a mistake," she told the nurse who was checking her vitals. "I can't afford this room. I need..." "All taken care of," the nurse said cheerfully. She was young, blonde, wearing scrubs with candy canes printed on them. "Your husband handled everything." "My husband? Mr. Morandi? Tall, dark hair. Looks like he could break someone in half and wouldn't break a sweat doing it." The nurse grinned. "He's in the waiting room. Been there the whole time. Hasn't moved except to make phone calls." Taylor's brain stalled. "He's still here?" "Been here 6 hours. You want me to send him in?" "No." "Yes." Taylor didn't know. She looked down at her daughter, asleep now in the plastic bassinet beside the bed, swaddled in a hospital blanket, wearing a tiny pink hat, and felt her chest constrict. "Give me 10 minutes, she said. "I need to clean up." The nurse nodded and left. Taylor used 8 of those minutes to cry in the bathroom. Hormones, she told herself. Postpartum. Adrenaline crash. Exhaustion. It wasn't because a stranger had stayed when everyone who was supposed to care had left. It wasn't because she'd given birth alone, except for medical professionals paid to keep her alive. It wasn't because her daughter was 3 hours old and already fatherless. She washed her face, finger-combed her hair, changed into the hospital gown that was somehow worse than her ruined clothes, walked back to the bed on shaking legs, and lowered herself onto the mattress like she was made of spun glass. 2 minutes later, there was a soft knock. "Come in," Taylor said. Victor Morandi stepped through the door carrying a bag from Nordstrom. He looked exactly the same as he had in the car. Same suit, same unreadable expression, but somehow different too. Tired, maybe. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his hair was slightly mussed, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. "You're still here," Taylor said stupidly. "I told you," Victor said. "You're not alone." He set the Nordstrom bag on the chair near the window, pulled something out, a onesie, soft pink cotton with white polka dots, then another. Tiny socks, a knitted hat, a blanket that looked handmade, expensive, the kind of thing Taylor had looked at online and never let herself imagine buying. "I didn't know what size," Victor said. His voice was carefully neutral. "The woman at the store said newborn, but He stopped, cleared his throat. "She can exchange them if they don't fit." Taylor stared at the small pile of baby clothes growing on the chair. Her throat burned. "You didn't have to do this," she managed. "No," Victor agreed. "I didn't." But he kept pulling things out. Diapers, wipes, formula. even though Taylor planned to breastfeed. Bottles, pacifiers, a children's book, Goodnight Moon, that looked brand new. When the bag was empty, Victor finally looked at her directly. "The nurse said you haven't chosen a name yet." Taylor shook her head. Couldn't speak. Victor walked to the bassinet, stood there, hands clasped behind his back, looking down at the sleeping baby with an expression that made Taylor's heart stumble. Longing. That's what it was. Raw and unguarded. "My mother," Victor said quietly, "died when I was 7. Complications from her second pregnancy. The baby, my sister, died with her." Taylor's breath caught. "My father was not a good man. He blamed me. Said if I'd been better, quieter, less trouble, my mother wouldn't have been stressed. Wouldn't have had the stroke." Victor's jaw worked. He didn't look away from the baby. It wasn't logical. I know that now. But when you're 7 and your world ends, logic doesn't matter. I believed him. Spent 20 years believing him. "Victor," Taylor whispered. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know if there was anything to say. "I made a rule," Victor continued. "After I took over my father's business, no women, no children, nothing that could be used against me. Nothing I could fail to protect." He finally turned to look at her. His eyes were storm gray and full of something that looked like breaking. "And then I saw you," he said, "bleeding on a street corner, alone, terrified. And He stopped, started again. "I couldn't leave you there." "Thank you," Taylor said. It felt inadequate. "Thank you for staying, for all of this. I'll pay you back. I don't know how, but I will." "I don't want your money, Taylor." "Then what do you want?" The question hung between them. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I want to know that you're both safe. That's all." It should have sounded controlling, possessive. But the way he said it, quiet, almost tentative, it sounded like a plea. Taylor's daughter chose that moment to wake up with a soft, mewling cry. Taylor moved to get up, but Victor was faster. He lifted the baby from the bassinet with a competence that startled Taylor, cradling her against his chest like he'd done this 1,000 times. The baby quieted immediately. Victor looked down at her with that same expression of longing, and something in Taylor's chest cracked wide open. "Harper," she heard herself say. Victor's eyes snapped to hers. "What?" "Her name. Harper. It means harp player, someone who brings music." Taylor's voice wavered. "She was born on the coldest night, but when I hold her, all I feel is warm." Victor's throat moved. He looked back down at Harper, who was staring up at him with unfocused, newborn eyes. "Harper," he repeated softly. "It's perfect." He brought her to Taylor, placed her gently in Taylor's arms, and for a moment his hands lingered, one supporting Harper's head, one steadying Taylor's shoulder. They were close enough that Taylor could smell his cologne. Something expensive and understated. Cedar, maybe. Smoke. "I have to go," Victor said, but he didn't move. "Will I see you again?" Taylor asked. She shouldn't have. It was too needy, too desperate. But she was 26 and had just given birth alone on Christmas Eve, and this dangerous stranger was the only person who'd shown up. Victor's expression shuddered. He stepped back, and the loss of his warmth was immediate. "Get some rest," he said. "The hospital has my number if you need anything. The bill is handled. When you're discharged, there's a car service arranged to take you wherever you need to go. Victor. Merry Christmas, Taylor." He walked out without looking back. Taylor sat in the too expensive hospital room holding her daughter and watched the door close. Outside the window, snow began to fall on the city that had nearly killed them both. "It's just us, baby girl," Taylor whispered into Harper's soft hair. "But that's okay. We're going to be okay." She almost believed it. 6 months passed like a fever dream. Taylor moved into a fourth-floor walk-up in Pilsen with no elevator and a radiator that clanked all night, but only worked half the time. $550 a month, utilities not included, for 400 square feet, and a bathroom where the shower leaked into the kitchen below. The landlord, a man named Rodriguez, who smelled like cigars and spoke mostly in grunts, had taken her deposit and first month's rent, with barely a glance at her non-existent credit score. Small mercies. She got a job waitressing at Lou's Diner, a 24-hour place on 18th Street that smelled like burnt coffee and defeat. The owner, Lou himself, 73, diabetic, perpetually irritated, paid her under the table and didn't ask questions about her lack of work history or references. $6 an hour plus tips. Night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 days a week. Small mercies. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watched Harper while Taylor worked. 82 years old, barely spoke English, but loved babies with a fierceness that made Taylor's eyes burn. Charged $20 a night and sent Taylor home with containers of soup that tasted like childhood. Comfort even though Taylor had never eaten anything like it growing up. Small mercies, everywhere. Just enough to survive. Taylor hadn't heard from Victor Morandi since Christmas Eve. Hadn't expected to. Men like that. Men who wore suits that cost thousands, who made phone calls in Italian, who had drivers and the kind of presence that made hospital administrators snap to attention. They didn't orbit in the same universe as single mothers living in walk-ups with broken radiators. But sometimes, late at night, when Harper woke crying and Taylor rocked her in the dark apartment while sirens screamed down 18th Street, Taylor thought about him. Wondered if he ever thought about them. Wondered if that moment in the hospital room, when he'd held Harper and looked like he was holding everything he'd ever lost, had meant anything beyond a rich man's passing charity. Probably not. Taylor pushed the thoughts away and focused on surviving. On Harper's first smile, at 8 weeks, directed at a spot of sunlight on the wall. On her first laugh, at 3 months when Mrs. Chen made silly faces. On the way she gripped Taylor's finger in her tiny fist and made every sleepless night, every aching foot, every dollar store dinner worth it. Summer came. The apartment turned sweltering. Taylor bought a second-hand fan that rattled like it had asthma and pointed it at Harper's crib. By late June, Harper was 6 months old, sitting up, babbling, reaching for everything with sticky, curious hands. She had dark hair like Taylor, but her eyes had settled into a gray-green that reminded Taylor of Lake Michigan on cloudy days. Taylor tried not to think about whose eyes they resembled. Tried not to remember the way Victor had looked at Harper like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Thursday night, 3rd week of June. Lou's Diner was dead. Just 2 truckers nursing coffee at the counter and a drunk kid passed out in booth 7. Taylor was refilling salt shakers when the bell over the door chimed. She looked up out of habit. Stopped breathing. Victor Morandi stood in the doorway wearing dark jeans, a black t-shirt, and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else but had come here anyway. Their eyes met across the diner. Taylor's hands went numb. The salt shaker slipped, hit the counter, exploded into a white cloud that she barely registered. 6 months. He'd been gone 6 months. And now he was here, standing in her diner at 2:15 in the morning, looking at her like what? Like he'd been starving and she was bread. Like he'd been drowning and she was air. "Taylor," he said. His voice carried across the empty space, low and controlled and doing something complicated to her nervous system. "What are you doing here?" The words came out sharper than she meant them to. Victor's jaw tightened. He walked toward her slowly, deliberately, like approaching a spooked animal. Can we talk? I'm working. Please. The word, that single word, stopped Taylor cold. Men like Victor Morandi didn't say please, didn't ask. They commanded, expected, took. Lou appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, looked at Victor, looked at Taylor, grunted. Take your break, Reeves. 30 minutes. Taylor opened her mouth to argue, but Lou was already shuffling back to the kitchen, and Victor was standing there with that expression that made her chest ache, and she was so tired of being angry at men who'd left her. Fine, she said, untied her apron. 30 minutes. They sat in booth 3, away from the truckers. Taylor folded her hands on the table to keep them from shaking. How's Harper? Victor asked. Of course, that was his first question. Not how are you or I'm sorry for disappearing. How's Harper? She's good, Taylor said. Healthy, happy. 6 months old as of last week. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. 6 months. Yeah. Silence stretched between them. Victor's hands rested on the table, and Taylor really noticed for the first time, the scars across his knuckles. Old, faded, but unmistakable. Someone who'd thrown a lot of punches in his life. Why are you here, Victor? Taylor asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph, set it on the table between them. Taylor looked down. It was a picture of a woman. Young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and a smile that looked like it had taken effort to maintain. She stood in what looked like a hospital room, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly. My mother, Victor said. 3 weeks before she died. Taylor's throat closed. I found this last month, in my father's things. He's been dead 5 years, and I'm still finding... Victor stopped, swallowed. I kept thinking about what you said. In the hospital. That Harper was born on the coldest night but makes you feel warm. He looked at Taylor, and his eyes were the same color as Harper's. Oh no. I haven't been able to stop thinking about either of you, Victor said. His voice was rough now, stripped of that careful control. I told myself I was staying away because it was safer. Because my world isn't... I'm not. He made a frustrated sound. But the truth is, I was scared, terrified. Because when I held Harper, when I looked at you, I felt something I swore I'd never feel again. What? Taylor whispered. Hope. The word landed between them like a grenade. I don't need you to feel hope for us, Taylor said. Her voice shook. We're surviving just fine. Victor's expression hardened. You're working night shifts in a diner and living in an apartment with a broken heater. How do you know that? Silence. Taylor's blood went cold. Have you been watching me? Making sure you're safe, Victor corrected. But he didn't deny it. Taylor stood up. I need to get back to work. Taylor. No. She backed away from the booth. You don't get to disappear for 6 months and then show up acting like you have some claim on us. We're not a charity case. We're not your redemption project. We're just... Her voice cracked. We're just trying to survive, and we're doing it without you. She turned and walked back to the counter, grabbed a rag, started wiping down surfaces that were already clean. Victor sat in the booth for another 5 minutes. Then he stood, walked to the counter, placed a business card next to her hand. If you ever need anything, he said. Anything at all, call. I won't, Taylor said without looking at him. I know. He left. Taylor waited until the door closed, until his footsteps faded, until she was absolutely certain he was gone. Then she picked up the business card with shaking hands. Victor Morandi private number on the back, written in sharp, precise handwriting. "You're not alone, Taylor. You never were." She shoved the card in her pocket and went back to work. 3 weeks later, everything fell apart. Hillary. Reeves knocked on Taylor's door at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, wearing a cream-colored suit and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Taylor hadn't seen her sister in 8 months. Not since the phone call on Christmas Eve. Not since the text that said be safe while Taylor was freezing to death in an alley. "Hi, Tay," Hillary said, like no time had passed at all. Like she hadn't ignored every call, every voicemail, every desperate text Taylor had sent in those first terrifying weeks after Harper was born. Taylor stood in the doorway of her apartment, Harper balanced on her hip, and felt every muscle in her body lock down. Fight or flight. Prey, recognizing predator. "What do you want, Hillary?" Hillary's smile widened. Perfect white teeth. She'd always had perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect life. Married Marcus Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen next door, at 28. Big house in Evanston. Important job doing something with marketing. No children, though, which Hillary had always framed as a choice until their mother died, and took with her the pretense that Hillary had ever wanted kids in the first place. Except the way Hillary was looking at Harper now, calculating, hungry, made Taylor's skin crawl. "I wanted to see my niece," Hillary said. "Can I come in?" Every instinct screamed no. But Taylor was raised to be polite, raised to believe family meant something, raised by parents who would have been horrified by the idea of turning your sister away. So she stepped back, led Hillary into the too small apartment that smelled like fried rice from Mrs. Chen's and formula, and that slightly sour scent of baby spit-up that Taylor could never quite eliminate no matter how much she cleaned. Hillary's gaze swept the space, cataloging, judging, landing on the crib in the corner. Second hand, one side held together with duct tape because the latch had broken. On the stack of clean laundry Taylor hadn't had time to fold. On the crack in the window that Taylor had covered, with plastic sheeting to keep the cold out, come winter. "You're living here?" Hillary asked. Her voice dripped with something that sounded like concern but tasted like acid. "It's what I can afford." "And working nights at a diner?" Taylor's grip on Harper tightened. "How do you know that?" "Facebook." Hillary shrugged. "You're tagged in the location sometimes." That was a lie. Taylor didn't use Facebook. Hadn't since before Harper was born. But she didn't argue. Hillary sat down on the futon. That doubled as Taylor's bed without being invited. Crossed her legs, smoothed her skirt. "This isn't a life for a child, Taylor." "Excuse me?" "Look around." Hillary gestured vaguely. "You're exhausted. You're broke. You're raising a baby alone in a neighborhood where I heard gunshots from the parking lot." Taylor felt her pulse spike. "We're fine." "Are you?" Hillary leaned forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're barely holding it together. And Harper deserves better. Harper has everything she needs. Does she? Or are you just telling yourself that because you're too proud to ask for help?" Taylor's jaw locked. "I asked you for help. On Christmas Eve. You sent me to voicemail." Hillary's expression flickered. Guilt, maybe. Or irritation at being reminded. "I was with Marcus's family. I couldn't just... I was dying in an alley." "Don't be dramatic. I gave birth 3 hours later." Harper started crying. The raised voices, the tension. She could feel it even at 6 months old. Taylor immediately softened, bouncing her gently, shushing her. "Shh, baby, it's okay. Mommy's here." Hillary watched this with an expression Taylor couldn't name. Then she stood, walked to Taylor, reached out. "Let me hold her." "No." "Taylor, I'm her aunt. You're a stranger. You've never even asked to meet her before now." Hillary's smile sharpened. "I'm trying to be here now, trying to help. but you're making it very difficult. I don't need your help. Yes, you do. You just don't know it yet. Something about the way she said it, certain, cold, made Taylor's stomach drop. Hillary picked up her purse, headed for the door, paused with her hand on the knob. Marcus and I have been talking. We want to help. We have space, resources, stability. Everything a child needs to thrive. What are you saying? Hillary turned, met Taylor's eyes directly. I'm saying Harper deserves a real home, a real family, not... She gestured at the apartment. This. Taylor felt the world tilt. Get out. Think about it. Get out of my home. This isn't a home, Taylor. It's barely a shelter. And one day, someone's going to notice. Social services, the courts, someone. Taylor's vision whited out. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to save my niece from growing up the way we did. Poor. Scared. Watching our mother work herself to death while our father drank himself to death. Is that what you want for Harper? That's not, isn't it? Hillary's voice turned soft, poisonous. You're already exhausted, and she's only 6 months old. What happens when she's 2, 5, 10? When she starts asking why she doesn't have a father, why she doesn't have nice things, why her mother is never home because she's working night shifts to keep the lights on. Taylor's hand shook. Harper was still crying, sensing the wrongness in the air. Leave, Taylor whispered. Now. Hillary studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that meant she'd already won and was just waiting for Taylor to realize it. I'll be in touch, she said, and left. Taylor locked the door behind her, checked the lock twice, 3 times. Then she sank onto the futon holding Harper and tried to remember how to breathe. Two weeks later, there was a knock on the door. Different this time. Official. Taylor opened it to find a woman in a pantsuit holding a clipboard and an ID badge that said, Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. Taylor Reeves? Taylor's world ended for the second time. Yes? I'm Sarah Michaels, caseworker with DCFS. We've received a report of potential neglect concerning a minor residing at this address. May I come in? Taylor's brain whited out. What? No, there's no neglect. Who? But she knew. Even before she asked, she knew. She let Ms. Michaels in because refusing would have looked worse. Watched numbly as the woman walked through the apartment, taking notes. Opened the mostly empty fridge, checked the crib with the duct-taped side, examined the plastic-covered window, asked questions in a voice that was professionally kind but fundamentally disbelieving. How many hours do you work per week? Who watches Harper while you're at work? Has she had her 6-month checkup? Can I see documentation of her vaccinations? Taylor answered everything, showed the appointment card from the free clinic, explained that Mrs. Chen was a licensed daycare provider, which was technically true, though Mrs. Chen's daycare was her apartment next door. Ms. Michaels made notes, told Taylor she'd be scheduling a follow-up visit, left. Taylor sat on the futon after she'd gone and stared at nothing. Harper crawled over, 6 months old and already trying to explore the world, and pulled herself up using Taylor's leg. Big gray-green eyes looking up at her mother like she could make everything okay. Taylor picked her up, held her close, whispered into her soft hair. I'm not going to let them take you. I promise. I'll fix this. She didn't know how to finish that sentence. So instead, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands, scrolled through her contacts to a number she'd entered but never called, stared at the name, Victor Morandi, pressed dial before she could talk herself out of it. It rang once, twice. Taylor. Victor's voice, rough like he'd been asleep, or like he'd been waiting for this call for weeks. "I need help," Taylor said. Her voice broke. "Please." "Need help." "Where are you?" "Home. But they're trying to—" She couldn't say it. Couldn't make it real by speaking it out loud. "I'm coming," Victor said. "Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Taylor locked the door, sat on the futon holding Harper, and waited for the most dangerous man she'd ever met to save them. Victor arrived in 18 minutes. Taylor heard the knock, 3 sharp raps, and looked through the peephole to see him, standing in the hallway wearing dark jeans and a black shirt, hair disheveled like he'd run his hands through it repeatedly on the drive over. She opened the door. Victor stepped inside, and his eyes went immediately to Harper in Taylor's arms, then to Taylor's face. Whatever he saw there made his expression turn to stone. "Tell me everything," he said. So Taylor did. Hillary's visit, the thinly veiled threats, the DCFS caseworker appearing 2 weeks later, the questions, the inspection, the follow-up visit scheduled for next week. Victor listened without interrupting. When Taylor finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then, "Do you have any documentation? Text from Hillary? Messages?" Taylor shook her head. "She came in person, never put anything in writing." Victor's jaw worked. "Smart. She's building a case, using the system against you." "But I'm not neglecting Harper." Taylor's voice rose. Harper stirred, and Taylor immediately lowered it. "I'm doing everything I can. She's fed, she's clean, she's loved. I know that. But the system doesn't measure love. It measures metrics: adequate housing, financial stability, daycare credentials, all things that can be weaponized." Taylor felt her throat close. "So what do I do?" Victor looked around the apartment. At the duct-taped crib, the plastic-covered window, the bare walls. Taylor saw him cataloging everything exactly as Hillary had, as Ms. Michaels had. But when he looked back at her, there was no judgment. Only calculation. "You move," he said. "What?" "You move. Into my house. Temporarily. Until this is resolved." Taylor laughed. It came out sharp, jagged. "I can't move into your house. I don't even know what you do, who you are." "I know," Victor said quietly. "And I'm going to tell you, because you deserve to know exactly who you're trusting." He sat down on the futon, gestured for Taylor to sit beside him. She did, warily, Harper still clutched to her chest. "My name is Victor Morandi," he began. "I run the Southside Territory. Gambling, protection, construction contracts, waste management, legitimate businesses with illegitimate foundations. I took over from my father when I was 23. I've been doing this for 15 years. Taylor's heart hammered. "You're Mafia." "Yes." The word hung in the air between them. "I've hurt people," Victor continued. His voice was flat, factual. "I've killed people. Men who betrayed me, who threatened my operations, who crossed lines. I'm not a good man, Taylor. I'm not even trying to be." "Then why are you here?" Victor looked at Harper. "Because when I held her in the hospital, I remembered what it felt like to want to protect something. Someone. I spent 20 years building walls, and she knocked them down in 30 seconds. His eyes met Taylor's. Gray-green. The same color as Harper's. "I can't be her father," Victor said. "I won't pretend that's what this is, but I can keep you both safe. I can make sure Hillary doesn't have a leg to stand on. I can give you the resources to fight this." "Why?" Taylor whispered. "Why do you care?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My mother was pregnant when she died. 32 weeks. My father came home drunk, started a fight. She fell, hit her head. Stroke. By the time the ambulance came, it was too late. Taylor's breath caught. I was 7 years old, hiding in a closet, listening to her die, and I couldn't do anything. Couldn't save her, couldn't save my sister, couldn't even scream because I was too scared of what my father would do if he found me. Victor's voice remained steady, but Taylor saw his hands tighten into fists. I swore I'd never be that helpless again. Never watch someone vulnerable suffer because I wasn't strong enough to stop it. So I became strong. Stronger than my father. Stronger than anyone who could hurt the people He stopped, looked away. The people you care about. Taylor finished softly. Victor nodded once. Taylor looked, down at Harper, asleep now in her arms. Thought about Hillary's cold smile, about Ms. Michaels's clipboard, about the follow-up visit that would determine whether Taylor kept her daughter or lost her to a system designed to measure everything except what mattered. If I move in, Taylor said slowly, it's temporary, just until this is over. Of course. And I pay rent. Something. I'm not a charity case. Victor's mouth almost curved. You can cook. I haven't had a home-cooked meal in years. Deal. They shook hands. Victor's grip was warm, firm, steady. Everything Taylor needed. Pack what you need, Victor said, standing. I'll send someone tomorrow for the rest. Now? It's 3 a.m. Now, before Hillary can make another move. Taylor looked around the apartment. 400 square feet of barely surviving. But it had been hers. The first place that was just hers and Harper's. Okay, she whispered. Okay. It took 30 minutes to pack everything that mattered. Clothes, diapers, Harper's worn teddy bear, the few photos Taylor had of her parents, the hospital bracelet from the night Harper was born. Victor carried everything to the car. A different one this time. Dark gray, still expensive. Settled Harper's car seat in the back with the kind of careful precision that suggested he'd practiced. Mrs. Chen opened her door as they were leaving. Looked at Victor. Looked at Taylor. Said something in Mandarin that Taylor didn't understand, but that sounded like approval. Victor responded in the same language. Fluid. Perfect. Mrs. Chen nodded, patted Taylor's arm, went back inside. You speak Mandarin? Taylor asked as they descended the stairs. 5 languages, Victor said. Comes with the territory. The drive to Victor's house took 40 minutes. They left the city behind, headed north into suburbs that got progressively nicer until they reached an area where houses became estates and estates became fortresses. Victor's house sat at the end of a private road, surrounded by high walls and security cameras. The gate opened automatically as they approached. The house itself was massive. 3 stories, stone and glass, lit from within by soft golden light. Taylor's breath caught. This is where you live? Yes. Alone? I have staff. They don't live here. He pulled into the circular driveway, killed the engine, turned to look at Taylor. Last chance to change your mind, he said quietly. Taylor looked back at the sleeping city they'd left behind, thought about the walk-up with the broken radiator, about Hillary's smile, about Ms. Michaels's clipboard. I'm not changing my mind, she said. Victor nodded, got out, came around to open her door. Taylor stepped out into her new life, carrying her daughter, and followed a Mafia boss into his fortress. Victor's house was nothing like Taylor expected. She'd imagined something cold, sterile, all marble and leather and sharp edges, the kind of place that looked expensive but felt empty. Instead, she walked into warmth. Hardwood floors, soft rugs, furniture that looked comfortable rather than just expensive. A staircase with wrought iron railings. Windows everywhere, currently dark, but she imagined would flood the space with light come morning. Guest room is upstairs, Victor said, leading the way. Second door on the right. It has an ensuite bathroom. I'll have someone bring up a crib tomorrow. Harper sleeps with me, Taylor said quickly. Victor paused on the stairs, looked back at her. Is that safe? I've been doing it for 6 months. I'm careful. He nodded slowly, continued up. The guest room was bigger than Taylor's entire apartment. King-sized bed, dresser, reading chair by the window, attached bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. Taylor stood in the doorway holding Harper and felt vertigo. Too much? Victor asked. I don't know how to exist in a space like this, Taylor admitted. You'll learn. He set her bags down near the dresser. Kitchen is downstairs. Help yourself to anything. Coffee maker is automatic. Just press the button. I'll be in my office if you need me. At 4 a.m? I don't sleep much. He turned to leave, and Taylor heard herself say, Victor? He stopped. Thank you. For this. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever... You don't owe me anything, Taylor. Get some rest. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Taylor stood in the middle of the too-big room holding her sleeping daughter, and tried not to cry. Failed. Morning came too quickly. Taylor woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to curtain and Harper's insistent babbling. She'd been awake for approximately 4 seconds when there was a soft knock on the door. Come in, Taylor called, still half asleep. A woman entered carrying a tray. Late 50s, gray hair pulled back, wearing simple slacks and a cardigan. She had kind eyes and moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this work for decades. Good morning, Miss Reeves. I'm Margaret. I manage the house. Mr. Morandi asked me to bring you breakfast and see if you needed anything. Taylor stared at the tray. Coffee, eggs, toast, fruit. Real food. Hot food. Thank you. You didn't have to. Mr. Morandi was very clear about making sure you and the baby are comfortable. Margaret set the tray on the small table near the window. There's a high chair in the kitchen if you need it. And I took the liberty of ordering some baby supplies. They should arrive this afternoon. I can't let him pay for all that. Margaret smiled. It was the kind of smile that suggested she'd heard this argument before and knew exactly how it would end. Mr. Morandi does what Mr. Morandi wants, she said gently. I've worked for him for 10 years. Trust me on this. She left before Taylor could protest further. Taylor fed Harper, then herself, trying to ignore how good real eggs tasted after months of dollar store cereal. After breakfast, she ventured downstairs. The house was even more beautiful in daylight. Large windows overlooked gardens that were meticulously maintained. The kitchen was enormous. Restaurant-grade appliances, marble countertops, an island that could seat 6. Victor sat at that island, laptop open, coffee steaming beside him. He wore a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when Taylor entered. Morning, he said. Hi. Taylor shifted Harper on her. Hip. Margaret brought breakfast. Thank you. You needed to eat. I could have made something. You're a guest, Taylor, not staff. The word guest felt wrong. Guests stayed for a weekend. Taylor was hiding from her sister in the state. But she didn't argue. Harper chose that moment to reach toward Victor, making grabbing motions and babbling. Victor's expression softened immediately. He closed the laptop, removed his glasses, and held out his hands. May I? Taylor hesitated, then handed Harper over. Victor held her with the same careful competence he'd shown at the hospital. Harper immediately grabbed his nose, giggled when he made an exaggerated sound of pain. Something in Taylor's chest twisted. I have a meeting at 11, Victor said, bouncing Harper gently. But I'll be back by 3. Margaret will be here if you need anything. Don't go outside the property. The security system is armed. Am I a prisoner? You're protected. There's a difference. Is there? Victor met, her eyes over Harper's head. Yes. Because you can leave whenever you want. But if Hillary shows up, if DCFS shows up, if anyone shows up asking questions, you're not here. Understood? Taylor understood. What about the follow-up visit? Cancel it. Tell them you've relocated temporarily for family reasons. Give them this address. Won't that look suspicious? Let me worry about what it looks like. My lawyers are already building a counter case, character witnesses, financial documentation, evidence that you're a fit mother providing adequate care. How? I have resources. Let me use them. Harper yawned, snuggled into Victor's chest, and promptly fell asleep. Victor looked down at her with an expression that made Taylor's throat close. She trusts you, Taylor whispered. Children are terrible judges of character, Victor said, but his voice was soft. Or maybe they see something adults miss. Victor's eyes found Taylor's. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then his phone buzzed. He handed Harper back to Taylor carefully, checked the screen, and his expression shuddered. I need to take this, he said. Stepped out of the kitchen. Taylor heard him answer in Italian, heard his voice turn cold, sharp, heard him give orders in a tone that reminded her exactly who he was and what he did. She looked down at Harper, sleeping peacefully in her arms. What are we doing, baby girl? Taylor whispered. What have we gotten ourselves into? Harper didn't answer, just sighed, in her sleep, and curled closer. The 3 days passed. Taylor fell into an uneasy routine. Mornings with Harper in the two-big bedroom. Afternoons in the garden while Victor worked in his office. Evenings cooking dinner. Simple things, pasta and vegetables, nothing fancy. While Victor watched from the island like she was performing magic. You didn't have to do this, he said the third night, watching her drain spaghetti. We had a deal. I cook, you provide. Housing. I would have provided housing anyway. I know. But I need to contribute something. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then, you already do. Taylor looked up. What? This house has been empty for 10 years. I sleep here, work here, but it's never been... This. A home. The word hung between them. Before Taylor could respond, there was a sharp knock at the front door. Not Margaret's soft tap. Not the gentle chime of a delivery. Sharp, insistent, official. Victor was on his feet immediately. Stay here. Don't come out. Victor! But he was already moving toward the door, and Taylor's blood went cold because she knew what this was before Victor even opened it. Ms. Michaels stood on the front step. Behind her, 2 police officers. Mr. Morandi, Ms. Michaels said, we're looking for Taylor Reeves. We have reason to believe she's residing here with a minor child, and we need to conduct a welfare check. Victor's expression was stone. Do you have a warrant? We have a court order for immediate inspection based on abandonment of her previous residence and failure to appear for scheduled follow-up. Taylor's vision whited. She hadn't abandoned her apartment. She'd texted Ms. Michaels the new address, just like Victor told her to. Except she'd used her old phone. The one that sometimes didn't send messages because she couldn't always afford data. Oh God. Taylor Reeves is a guest in my home, Victor said, his voice ice cold. And you will not enter without a warrant. Sir, we can obtain a warrant within the hour. Then do so, and bring your supervisor, because you're operating on false information, and when I'm done, you'll be lucky to still have a job. Ms. Michaels' expression flickered. Uncertainty. One of the officers stepped forward. Sir, we're just trying to ensure the safety of a child. The child is safe, better fed, better housed, better protected than she's ever been. Come back with a warrant and I'll prove it. Then get off my property." There was a long, tense moment where nobody moved. Then Ms. Michaels nodded tightly. "We'll be back within 2 hours. I'll be waiting." Victor closed the door, locked it, turned. Taylor stood in the kitchen doorway holding Harper, shaking so hard she could barely stand. I sent the text. I swear I sent it." "I know." Victor's voice gentled. "This isn't your fault. Someone's feeding them information. Someone who wants you to look incompetent." "Hillary." "Most likely." Taylor felt her knees buckle. Victor was there immediately, catching her, guiding her to the couch. "They're going to take her," Taylor whispered. "They're going to take Harper and give her to Hillary, and I'll never—" "No." Victor's hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me, Taylor. They are not taking Harper. I won't let them. Do you understand? I won't let them. You can't stop a court order. Watch me." He pulled out his phone, made 3 calls in rapid succession. The first in English to someone he called counselor. The second in Italian to someone whose name Taylor didn't catch. The third to someone he addressed as Judge Patterson. By the time Ms. Michaels returned 90 minutes later, she had a warrant, her supervisor, and a lawyer Victor had never met but who somehow already had a complete file on Taylor's case. They conducted their inspection. Found Harper well-fed, clean, happy. Found documentation of every doctor's appointment, every vaccination, every milestone. Found character statements from Margaret, from Mrs. Chen, from Lou at the diner. Found absolutely nothing wrong. Ms. Michaels left looking confused and frustrated. Her supervisor apologized for the inconvenience. The lawyer shook Victor's hand and told Taylor she had nothing to worry about. When they were finally alone, Taylor collapsed onto the couch and sobbed into her hands. Victor sat beside her, didn't touch her, just sat there, solid and steady, while Taylor cried out 6 months of terror. When she finally lifted her head, Victor handed her a tissue. "How did you do that?" Taylor asked, her voice wrecked. "I told you, I have resources." "That was more than resources. That was power," Victor finished quietly. "I have power, and I'm using it to protect you." Taylor looked at him. Really looked. At the expensive clothes, the scarred knuckles, the eyes that had seen terrible things and done worse. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me? Why Harper?" Victor was silent for a long moment. Then, "Because when I held her in that hospital, I felt like maybe I could be someone other than my father's son. And when I look at you, I see someone fighting like hell to give her daughter the childhood you never had. And that," his voice roughened, "that's worth protecting." Taylor didn't think. She just moved, leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Victor went completely still. Then his hand came up to cup the back of her head, and he kissed her back like she was air and he'd been drowning. It lasted 5 seconds, maybe 10. When they broke apart, Taylor's heart was hammering and Victor's eyes were dark. "We shouldn't," he started. "I know. This complicates things. I know. But I can't." He stopped, swallowed. "I can't stop thinking about you. Haven't been able to since Christmas Eve." "Me neither," Taylor whispered. They stared at each other. Harper, sensing the tension, started to fuss. The moment broke. Taylor picked up her daughter. Victor stood, ran a hand through his hair, and looked like he was waging an internal war. "I need to make some calls," he said finally. "We're not done with this. Hillary won't stop just because one inspection went well. What do we do? Victor's expression turned cold, calculating. The Mafia boss sliding back into place. We go on offense, he said, and we destroy her case before she can build it. Hillary made her next move 2 weeks later. Taylor was in the kitchen making lunch when Margaret appeared in the doorway. Her usual composed expression cracked with something that looked like anger. Miss Reeves, there's someone here to see you. A Mr. Timothy Grant. He says he's Harper's father and he's demanding to see his daughter. Taylor's blood turned to ice. What? He's at the gate with a lawyer. They're citing parental rights. Mr. Morandi is handling it, but he asked me to bring you to his office. Taylor scooped up Harper and followed Margaret through the house. Victor's office was on the first floor, all dark wood and leather and windows that overlooked the front drive. He stood behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, watching security monitors that showed the gate. On the screen, Taylor could see Timothy, same weak chin, same calculated smile. Beside him stood a man in a cheap suit, carrying a briefcase. Victor ended his call, looked at Taylor. Did you put his name on the birth certificate? No, I left it blank. Good. That buys us time. He pressed a button on his desk. Tell them Miss Reeves is unavailable, and they need to schedule a formal visitation request through proper channels. They're threatening to call the police, came a voice through the speaker. One of Victor's security team. Let them. They have no legal standing. Victor released the button, looked at Taylor. He's doing this for money. Hillary's paying him. How do you know? Because men like Timothy Grant don't develop paternal instincts after abandoning a pregnant woman in an alley. They develop financial motivation. Taylor sank into one of the leather chairs. Harper clutched to her chest. This is never going to end, is it? She's never going to stop. Victor circled the desk, crouched in front of Taylor so they were eye level. Then we make her stop. How? By exposing her, by showing the court exactly who she is and what she's trying to do. We don't have proof. We will. Victor's expression was granite. I'm done playing defense, Taylor. Time to remind your sister that she picked a fight with the wrong family. The word family made Taylor's breath catch. Victor seemed to realize what he'd said. His jaw tightened, but he didn't take it back. Instead, he stood and made another call. Marco, I need surveillance on Hillary Reeves Chen. Everything. Phones, emails, bank records. I want to know every person she talks to, every dollar she spends, every lie she tells. He paused. Yes, immediately. I don't care what it costs. He hung up, looked at Taylor. Give me 1 week. I'll have everything we need. Victor delivered in 5 days. Taylor sat in his office while he spread documents across the desk, like evidence at a crime scene. Bank statements, text messages, email printouts, photographs. Hillary has been planning this for 4 months, Victor said, his voice clinical. Since February. 3 months after Harper was born. He pointed to a bank statement. Payment to Timothy Grant. $5,000. Memo says, consultation fee. There are 3 more after it. Another document. Emails to a family law attorney. Subject line, emergency custody petition for unfit mother. Dated 6 weeks ago. Another. Text messages between Hillary and her husband Marcus. Quote, once we have the baby, Taylor won't fight back. She never does. She'll just disappear like she always wanted to. Taylor's vision swam. She planned all of this. Yes, including the DCFS complaints. Your landlord received an anonymous tip about drug use in your apartment. He was legally obligated to report it. I've never touched drugs in my life. I know. That's why the inspection found nothing. But the report still exists in the system. Creates a paper trail that looks damaging. Taylor felt sick. Why? Why would she do this? Victor pulled out another document. Medical records. Hillary had a hysterectomy 18 months ago. Ovarian cancer. She's in remission, but she can't have biological children. Understanding crashed into Taylor like a wave. She wants Harper. She wants Harper. And she's been systematically destroying your credibility to make it happen. Victor's voice turned cold. But she made a mistake. She involved Timothy, and Timothy is an idiot. He's been documenting everything thinking he'll have leverage for more money later. Victor tapped another printout. Voice recording. Hillary and Timothy discussing how much he'll testify to in court. He's willing to say you used drugs during pregnancy, that you were emotionally unstable, that he feared for his safety. All lies. All provable lies. Taylor couldn't breathe. How did you get all this? Victor's expression was unreadable. Do you really want to know? Taylor thought about what that meant. About the man sitting across from her who ran a criminal empire. About the resources he'd just deployed to invade her sister's privacy, hack her communications, steal her medical records. No, Taylor said finally. I don't want to know. I just want this to end. It will. Tomorrow. Tomorrow? Victor pulled out one more document. A court filing. Emergency hearing. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. We're petitioning for a restraining order against Hillary and Timothy on grounds of harassment and attempted parental alienation. We have evidence. They have lies. Will it work? Yes, because I've already spoken to Judge Patterson, off the record, and I've made it very clear that if this case isn't resolved in your favor, certain other cases he's presiding over might become complicated. Taylor's stomach dropped. You blackmailed a judge? I persuaded a judge to look at the evidence objectively and rule based on facts rather than bias. Victor's voice was steel. There's a difference. Is there? In my world? Yes. Taylor looked at the documents spread across the desk. Evidence obtained illegally. Judges influenced through pressure. Her sister's entire life laid bare through methods that were probably felonies. She should have been horrified. Should have told Victor to stop, to do this the right way, through proper channels. But when she looked at Harper, 6 months old, sleeping peacefully in the carrier at Taylor's feet, completely unaware that her entire future hung in the balance, Taylor felt something else entirely. Gratitude. Fierce, absolute gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. Victor's expression softened fractionally. You don't thank me for this. You thank me when it's over and Harper is safe. The hearing, next morning lasted 90 minutes. Taylor sat beside Victor's lawyer, a woman named Catherine Reynolds, who wore a power suit and an expression that suggested she ate opposing counsel for breakfast, and watched her entire life dissected in front of a judge. Hillary sat across the aisle with her lawyer, Marcus beside her, Timothy nowhere to be seen. Catherine presented evidence methodically, bank transfers, text messages, medical records proving Taylor had never used drugs, character witnesses, Margaret, Mrs. Chen, even Lou from the diner, who wore a suit for the first time in probably 20 years and testified that Taylor was the hardest working woman I ever employed. Hillary's lawyer tried to argue that the evidence was obtained illegally. Catherine calmly pointed out that anonymous tips sent to DCFS were also illegal if they contained knowingly false information, which these did. Judge Patterson, a man in his 60s with silver hair and shrewd eyes, listened to everything. Asked pointed questions, requested documentation. At one point, Hillary tried to speak. Your Honor, I only wanted what's best for Harper. Taylor is my sister. I love her, but she's not stable enough. Mrs. Chen, Judge Patterson interrupted. Do you have any actual evidence of instability? Medical records, police reports, documented incidents? Well, no, but Then I suggest you stop speaking before you incriminate yourself further for filing false reports with a state agency. Hillary's mouth snapped shut. The judge reviewed documents for another 20 minutes. Then he looked up. Based on the evidence presented, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order against Hillary Reeves Chen and Timothy Grant. Neither party is to contact Taylor Reeves or approach within 500 feet of her or the minor child Harper Reeves. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Taylor felt her lungs expand for the first time in weeks. Furthermore, Judge Patterson continued, I'm referring this matter to the state's attorney for investigation of false reporting to DCFS and potential conspiracy to commit parental kidnapping. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Grant, you are advised to retain separate legal counsel immediately. Hillary's face went white. Your Honor, I never... Save it for the state's attorney. Judge Patterson banged his gavel. We're adjourned. Taylor stood on shaking legs. Catherine was saying something about next steps, about making the restraining order permanent, but Taylor couldn't process it. She turned and saw Victor standing at the back of the courtroom. He'd stayed the entire time, despite not being called as a witness, just watching, making sure. Their eyes met across the room. Victor nodded once. It's over. Taylor nodded back. Thank you. Hillary tried to approach as they left the courtroom. Victor stepped between them so smoothly it looked choreographed. You heard the judge, he said softly. 500 feet. This isn't over, Hillary hissed. Her, perfect composure had cracked. Makeup smeared, hair disheveled. You think you can just buy your way out of... I didn't buy anything. Your sister fought for her child and won. Because she's a good mother. Something you'll never understand. Victor's voice was quiet, but the menace underneath was unmistakable. Hillary took a step back, looked at Taylor over Victor's shoulder. You're making a mistake. He's dangerous. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. I know exactly what I've gotten into, Taylor said. Her voice was steady. A family that protects each other. Something you wouldn't recognize if it killed you. She walked past Hillary without looking back. That night, Taylor made dinner for the last time as a guest. She'd been living in Victor's house for nearly a month, long enough that she knew which cabinet held the pasta, which drawer had the good knives, how Victor took his coffee, long enough that Harper recognized his footsteps and reached for him when he came home. Long enough that it felt less like hiding and more like living. But the threat was gone now. Hillary was facing criminal charges. Timothy was being investigated for fraud. DCFS had closed Taylor's case with a finding of unfounded allegations. Taylor could go back to her walk-up in Pilsen. Back to her life. Except when she tried to imagine it. The broken radiator, the fourth-floor stairs, the night shifts while Mrs. Chen watched Harper. She felt nothing but exhaustion. Victor found her, in the kitchen staring at a pot of sauce that needed stirring. You okay? He asked. I don't know. He leaned against the counter. Waited. I should go back, Taylor said. Back to my apartment. Back to normal. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want. A month ago, I wanted to survive. Now She stopped, stirred the sauce. I don't know what normal even means anymore. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if you stayed? Taylor's hand stilled. What? Stay. You and Harper. Here. Victor, I can't just... Why not? He pushed off the counter, moved closer. Margaret loves having you both here. The house feels... He stopped, started again. It feels like a home when you're here. I'm not your responsibility. You're not my responsibility. You're my... He seemed to struggle with the word. You're important to me, both of you. Taylor set down the spoon, turned to face him fully. What are you saying? Victor's hands flexed at his sides. For a man who commanded an empire, who'd blackmailed judges and destroyed enemies, he looked almost nervous. I'm saying I don't want you to leave. I'm saying when I come home and hear Harper laughing, when I walk into the kitchen and smell real food, when I see you curled up on the couch reading while she sleeps, that's when I remember what I'm supposed to be protecting. Not territory, not business, family. We're not your family, Victor. You could be. The words came out rough. If you wanted. No pressure. No expectations. Just, he swallowed. Just stay, please. Taylor's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. I can't be with someone because I need protection. That's not fair to either of us. Is that the only reason you'd stay? No, Taylor admitted, but it's part of it, and I need to know the difference between gratitude and what? And whatever this is that I feel when you hold Harper, when you look at me like I matter, when you move heaven and earth to keep us safe. Victor stepped closer. Close enough that Taylor could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the scar above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes had gone soft. I can't promise I'm a good man, he said quietly. I can't promise I won't make decisions that scare you or do things you don't agree with, but I can promise that as long as you're with me, nothing will hurt you or Harper. Ever. That's not gratitude, Taylor. That's... He stopped. Seemed to be searching for the right word. Love? Taylor whispered. Victor's breath caught. I don't know if I remember how to love. But whatever this is, this thing that makes me check my phone 100 times a day hoping you texted, that makes me drive past your apartment at 3 a.m. just to make sure the lights are off and you're safe, that makes me want to burn down the world for making you cry. If that's not love, it's close enough. Taylor's eyes burned. Harper and I are a package deal. You can't have one without the other. I don't want one without the other. I want... Victor's voice broke slightly. I want to come home to both of you. I want to teach her to read. I want to be there for her first day of school. I want to be someone she calls family, even if I'm not her biological father. That's a big commitment for someone who had a rule about no women and no children. Rules are meant to be broken by the right people. Victor's mouth curved slightly. You've been breaking my rules since Christmas Eve. Taylor thought about the walk-up apartment, about surviving, about the difference between existing and living. Then she thought about the past month, about Harper's laughter echoing through this house, about cooking dinner while Victor worked nearby, about falling asleep knowing they were both safe, about the way Victor had knelt in front of her when she was breaking and promised she wasn't alone, about the way he looked at Harper like she'd hung the moon, about the way her heart stopped every time he walked into a room. Okay, Taylor said. Victor blinked. Okay? We'll stay. For now. See how it goes. For now, Victor repeated. But he was smiling. Actually smiling. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger, less haunted. He closed the distance between them and kissed her. Soft this time. Gentle. Like she was something precious he'd been given and didn't quite believe was real. When they broke apart, Harper started crying from the living room. Taylor laughed. Perfect timing. I'll get her, Victor said. He left the kitchen, and Taylor heard him talking to Harper in that soft voice he only used with her. Heard Harper's cries turn to babbling, then laughter. Taylor stirred the sauce and felt something warm unfold in her chest. Hope, maybe, or love, or both. 6 months later, Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, the kind of night where snow sparkled under streetlights and the air smelled like pine and possibility. Taylor stood in the kitchen of what was no longer Victor's house but theirs, watching snow fall through the window. Harper was asleep upstairs, 1 year old now, walking, talking in fragments, calling Victor Papa, even though they'd never corrected her or suggested it. She just started on her own, and Victor had cried the first time. Actually cried. Strong arms wrapped around Taylor's waist from behind. Victor's chin rested on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Last year. This night. The worst night of your life. The night that led to this." Taylor turned in his arms. So maybe not the worst. Maybe just the beginning. Victor's hand came up to cup her face. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I never thought I'd have this. A home. A family. Someone who looks at me and sees something other than what I've done. I see what you do now. Every day. For us. It's not enough. It's everything." Victor kissed her forehead, her temple, her lips. "Marry me." Taylor's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me. Make this official. Let me be Harper's father legally, not just in practice. Let me..." He swallowed. "Let me be worthy of this. Of you." "You're already worthy, Victor." "Then say yes anyway." Taylor looked up at the man who'd opened a car door on the coldest night of her life and saved her. Who'd fought judges and criminals and the entire system to keep them safe. Who'd learned to change diapers and read bedtime stories and make pancakes shaped like animals. Who'd taken every broken piece of his own childhood and rebuilt it into something beautiful for Harper. "Yes," Taylor whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." Victor kissed her like she was air, and he'd been drowning for a year. Upstairs, Harper started crying. They broke apart, laughing. "I'll get her," Victor said. "We'll both go." They climbed the stairs together and entered Harper's room. The room that had once been Victor's childhood bedroom. The room where his mother used to read to him before she died. The room he'd kept locked for 20 years until Taylor had gently suggested it might be time to let new memories replace old ghosts. Harper stood in her crib, tear-streaked and reaching. "Mama. Papa." Victor picked her up, and Taylor wrapped her arms around both of them. Outside, snow continued to fall on Chicago, on the city that had almost killed them, on the streets where Taylor had once begged for help and found a man willing to break every rule he'd ever made. Inside, a family stood together in a room that no longer held ghosts. Just love. Just hope. Just the promise of every Christmas yet to come. Epilogue. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expected. Sometimes they're the ones the world told us to fear. Sometimes salvation comes from the most dangerous places, because that's where desperation and grace collide. Taylor learned that on the coldest night of her life. And Victor learned that strength isn't measured by how many enemies fear you, but by how many people feel safe enough to sleep peacefully in your arms. Maybe that's what all of us are searching for in the end. Not perfection, not fairy tales. Just someone willing to fight for us when we're too tired to fight for ourselves. Someone who sees our broken pieces and doesn't run. Someone who takes our worst night and turns it into a beginning. If this story touched something in you, if you believe broken people deserve second chances and love can bloom in the darkest places, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button to support stories that make you feel, and subscribe to Crimson Voices because we bring you new emotional journeys every single day. Before you go, check out our playlist for more tales of redemption, protection, and love that defies every rule. Thank you for being here tonight, for believing in hope, for remembering that even in our coldest moments, someone might open a door. Good night, and remember, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's choice, and that makes it even more powerful.